I want everyone to be empowered, but also the body does respond to these inputs. And we might not see it, but we
Yes.
have such high and unreasonable expectations sometimes. So just know, and I think I'm living proof, that even when you have a sort of dire biological age, which I was 39, but must have been in my late 60s then, you can still have the opportunity to change that. That's what's exciting, I think, is reversing that biological age.
What if the key to better health wasn't just in prescriptions, but in daily choices? Today, I'm joined by Leslie Kenny, who transformed her health after being diagnosed with 3 supposedly lifelong autoimmune conditions in her late 30s. Told there were no real solutions, she turned to health coaching and lifestyle medicine, ultimately putting her autoimmune conditions into remission through natural interventions. Now at 59, with a biological age of 21, Leslie is on a mission to redefine aging. Through Oxford Healthspan and the Oxford Longevity Project, she's bridging the gap between science and practical strategies for living well. Today we'll explore how movement supports longevity, fights chronic inflammation, and helps restore confidence in the body. If you're looking for ways to control your long-term health, this conversation is for you. Leslie, what was life like for you before your diagnoses?
I was one of these work hard, play hard people, and I was running a venture capital backed online matchmaking company. I was out late at night. I was definitely drinking. I was eating whatever I wanted. I did exercise. I was doing Pilates work, but I was not getting a lot of sleep, so I didn't have time for recovery. And I just was trying to do it all, but without giving my body the time to recover. And certainly didn't look at the other dietary inputs that I had in my diet. So eating lots of bread, pasta, fondue, cheese souffles, which all turned out to be a problem for me later.
Yeah. So a fairly normal life then, ultimately, for an awful
Yeah.
lot of people
Yeah.
who are leading incredibly busy lives. They've got active careers. Yeah. And so what age are we talking?
I was 39 when
39.
I was diagnosed and literally gave up my work around just around that time. I sold the company, wound everything down, and just focused on the diagnoses and trying to get a little bit better. I didn't think I'd be able to reverse them, but I thought I could at least make myself a better patient,
Yeah.
something better material for my doctor to work with. So I might respond better to some new drug that might come out and have a better shot at it working.
And what were your symptoms at that stage?
Pain in my hand. So I noticed that typing, I noticed was a problem, but turning faucets hurt,
Mm.
turning doorknobs, forget about opening jars, very tightly sealed jars of jam or anything else. It was really the everyday stuff that suddenly became painful. And my instinct was this must be what arthritis is like for an older person. But I'm only 39, so it's clearly not that. I'll go to my doctor, get it sorted out. And that's when I got the call from the doctor, from the doctor's office. Usually it's a nurse who says, your results are in and everything's fine. Bye. In this case, it was the doctor herself, not the nurse. And she said, your results are in, and I'd like you to come in so we can discuss them. So then I thought, well, that's obviously not good, but I certainly wasn't expecting what she told me.
So go on and tell us. So you had, was it 3 autoimmune condition diagnoses?
So what they diagnosed me with at that time was rheumatoid arthritis, made sense to me, arthritis, and lupus, which I'd never heard of. What they didn't diagnose, but which other doctors later discovered, was that I had had Hashimoto's at some point because most of my thyroid is gone. Right. So on ultrasound, they can see that there's about an eighth of the gland that's left. It's not the normal size at all. It's very, very small. And that's when later I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. But at the time in 2004, I was diagnosed just with the lupus and the RA.
Just.
Yeah. Well,
just.
It's so great. To ignorance is bliss. And I honestly did not know how serious lupus can be. It meant nothing to me. I think that when we think of illnesses, everybody knows what cancer is. Everybody knows what Alzheimer's is. Everybody knows it's bad if you have a stroke. But I'd never heard of it. So in a way, it didn't kind of connect in my brain that this was going to be this could be a very debilitating illness. And I'm glad that I didn't understand that, because it gave me the courage to take a run at it and believe that I could really do something to get better, even though my doctor said, when I asked her about diet or what about movement or sleeping? And she said, no, there's really nothing you can do.
Wow.
But it's not unusual. I've heard it's really the luck of the draw with the doctor, right? Some doctors are very well informed and they'll say, well, I understand you could have omega-3 fatty acids. That's anti-inflammatory. That might help. But other doctors, I've talked to so many other autoimmune patients, and they ask if there's anything they can do, and their doctors say, no, not really. And it doesn't even seem to matter how well educated these patients are, because I know someone who is a PhD from Cambridge, 3 children, every reason to try to change her diet. And her doctor never told her. And when she confronted her doctor to say, why didn't you tell me about fish oil being helpful? I would have changed my diet. And he said, it's just too hard to do. So sometimes, and again, it varies greatly from practitioner to practitioner. Some know about this and believe that their patients can be full collaborators with them. Other doctors, perhaps because they've had negative experiences in the past when they've tried to suggest these things, don't bother. So,
yeah. And, as I've talked about quite a lot on this podcast, on many an occasion, and they have 10 minutes and it's very hard. And even if you see someone relatively consistently, it's still 10 minutes. It's high pressure. They're under so much pressure themselves. So there's such a wider story.
Exactly. And they just do not have the time. There's a conveyor belt of patients they've got to get in and out, and they have quotas, right? They've got to get patients. Some doctors have said, I have 6 minutes, not 10 minutes.
And got to write notes and so on. Exactly. And so presumably at that point you were then put on medication.
I was put on immunosuppressants. At the time, these were injectables. And so I was given pre-filled syringes that I kept in my refrigerator. And I used visualization techniques to try to inject myself. I was diagnosed in the middle of my 5th IVF round. And so I had already been used to the idea of injecting drugs into my tummy. But these were longer needles. And although they're very thin diabetic needles, and if you ever have to inject yourself with anything, you want thin diabetic needles. Those are much better. I had trouble doing it. And I think one of the reasons I had trouble injecting myself, in spite of the visualization techniques of it being like a hot knife through butter, it was that philosophically, I wasn't in agreement with the idea of suppressing the immune system. And I remembered asking my doctor at the time, isn't it good? You're saying my immune system is really, it's overreacting, but that means that it's very strong. Isn't that a good thing? And she said, yes, but that's attacking your tissue. So that her solution was to suppress it. But in my mind, the solution should have been to bring it back to balance. And that was the problem. And I think doing those injections, I kept thinking, this is wrong. I shouldn't be suppressing my immune system. I should be restoring it to its balance point. And, the lifestyle changes she did tell me to make were to stay away from large social activities. So parties, going to the movie theater, anything where there were a large number of people. And especially, she said, avoid children because they tend to have a lot of germs. Well, we're both mothers, so we know this is true. When they go off to nursery, they come home and they bring everything going back, right?
And school and uni.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was told. My lifestyle changes were avoid large social, large concentrations of people.
Yeah, which is the opposite of how we get our healthy bacteria, isn't it?
Yeah,
ultimately, this is what we need.
Exactly.
We'll probably go on to that. So to then fast forward, so it didn't feel right, and therefore you're questioning your innate sense, your gut sense was saying to you, there must be more here I can do.
Exactly. So there must be more here that I can do. And I didn't just look at, diet, exercise, sleep. I did look for a therapy that would help to reset my immune system.
Right.
So I did that. That was something called intravenous immunoglobulin. And I still meet so many doctors who either don't know about it or who say, oh yeah, I learned about that in medical school. I've never ever used it, didn't know anybody who used it. Here in Britain, it's mostly used for very severe cases of multiple sclerosis. But in other countries, it's used for everything from cytokine storms in the brain. So that would be like bipolar mania, any kind of psychosis. Mm-hmm. So I know in Bahrain that it's first-line therapy for that. And it honestly, it just depends on the country you're in.
Yeah.
But what was great about intravenous immunoglobulin, or IVIG, is that it's an immune modulatory treatment. And so you're getting antibodies from thousands of donors, maybe anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 donors. And it was originally intended to help people who did not make their own antibodies to fight infection. But when they gave it to people, they noticed that it actually seemed to reduce autoimmune flares. And people who were on it had much better balanced immune systems. So not overactive, not underactive. Again, it brought it back to that balance point.
Where we want it. Yeah.
Where we want it. So, so I was diagnosed in 2004. I was given only the option of immunosuppressants, which cost my insurance company $5,000 a month. And I will say I was very grateful to have that insurance, but not a lot of people have that. And then I learned about IVIG from patient bulletin boards. And I could see that there was one small trial of 13 lupus patients in northern Germany that had been given IVIG, and every single one had improved. So this was the science I was looking for. It was the proof positive that you could get better from lupus. Because when my doctor told me about my diagnosis, she said, you should expect this to get worse over time. And when I pushed her to say, look, wait a second, you're the doctor, you're the expert, I'm paying you come up with a solution. I'm in the middle of my 5th IVF. This is inconvenient for me. She then said, hey, wait a second. You shouldn't be doing the IVF. I wouldn't do the IVF if I were you. Even if you're successful, you've only got a good 5 years left. Like, why put your body through this? And of course, for me, I was thinking, what do you mean? So it's going to get worse over time?
Yeah.
But actually,
over a normal lifespan? Yeah.
Yeah. But no, in this case, she's saying it's going to get worse over time. Your cytokines, your TNF alpha, your IL-6, they're so high that this has got an endpoint. So that was really shocking to me. And so having this evidence from this German trial was great. So I had to find then a doctor who would prescribe it for me. So my doctor wouldn't prescribe it for me, but I found someone in San Francisco who was within my health insurance network who would. And I did 2 of those. They were $12,000 each. And when I then went back to my doctor to get to the clinic I had asked to test again. When I had my first diagnosis, I said, look, let's test this again. So I went back after my IVIG, and after I had made a bunch of lifestyle changes, which involved movement, which involved big dietary changes and better sleep and less stress. But, she looked at my results and said, well, look at that. You don't have RA or lupus. And that was a complete shock, because they don't always tell you that this can be reversed. And I think I've met diabetes patients too, who have said, nobody told me I could reverse my diabetes by changing my lifestyle.
Yeah. And that's the whole lifestyle medicine side of things that has, before, I think there's a named sort of alternative medicine, which had its sort of pros and cons. There's other descriptions, but it seems so sad that it's still on the fringes of mainstream healthcare. And in fact, when particularly in countries like UK, where our healthcare system is really struggling, and it has such a beneficial add-on, both in terms of prevention and cure, or improvement, and yet it's not being integrated in the way that it could be, or supported in the way it could be.
It's not taught. That's why, in particular, I made huge changes to my diet, and I removed any inflammatory triggers to my immune system. So I wanted to reset the immune system, but then also remove the triggers so I wouldn't have flares again in the future. And that meant removing dairy, gluten, and eggs. Now, how many doctors will say to you, oh, well, this immune problem could be due to an allergen in your diet. We're going to have to test you for this. I've never heard of a doctor saying, let's do that. Functional medicine doctors will do it, but not your mainstream doctors, because they're not taught this.
No. Or very, very briefly, if they are. In fact, it's even nutrition, I believe, is covered in a matter of hours, which is unbelievable.
Same in the United States. There are, of course, wonderful doctors who go out of their way to learn about this in their own time. Yeah. But they are outliers.
Yeah. So you actually went on to train as a health coach, am I right in saying?
I did. Yeah. I did. So I did a program at...
Well, you knew so much already.
Well, I knew some. I mean, I always say I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor. I am a patient, but I have been at the sharp end of the stick. I have been the guinea pig. I have had to inject myself with this stuff. And I think a lot of us patients, we are kind of guinea pigs, right? I saw something the other day about, statins and risk of osteoporosis and osteopenia. And this is something that it's a study that's only just come out. And I thought, for a long time, people were told statins are the be all end all. And I'm not saying that they can't offer benefit. They can offer benefit. But what we didn't know was, okay, there is a little downside.
There is a risk, yeah.
Right, there is a risk. And if you're a woman and you are anyway at risk postmenopausally of osteoporosis and osteopenia, you should be aware of that. So there are a lot of things that, even a well-established drug like a statin that does have benefit, we are only still learning about its effects on the human body. And so, yes, we're all guinea pigs. Sorry to say.
Oh, lovely. Just taking a quick pause because I want to tell you about a new offer exclusively for listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to improve your mobility, strength, and learn more about moving well in daily life now and to train for your 90s, come and move with me in the Reclaim Movement membership. There's weekly live coaching in term time with hundreds of replays available, as well as hordes of 5 and 10-minute mini movement videos to follow throughout your day. I'm offering you a 15% discount on your first month's membership on top of the 7-day free trial. Go to reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to create your account and quote the code podcast15. Let's move together to feel better and keep doing all the things you love. So one of the, you do an awful lot of talks about your situation, and one of the sort of headline grabbing elements that people jump on, which is absolutely fascinating, is that your biological age is somewhat less than your chronological age. So I'd love to go into sort of what that means to start with, because it can sound a bit blah, blah.
Yeah, sure.
So chronological age being our age, but our birth to now age.
Right.
But biological is something different.
Biological age is based on everything from inflammatory markers, the age of your organs and tissues. It's an indicator of heart health, brain health, future susceptibility to disease. And you can be born in 1965, like I was, but you can have the biological age of somebody who was born in 2005. Or equally, you can be born in 1965 and have the biological age of somebody born in 1945. Yeah. So, chronological age is fixed, but biological age can be influenced. And it's a bit like, an annual report for a company that just shows you a snapshot of a company at that point in time, how they're doing financially. Biological age tests sort of give you a snapshot of where you are at that point in time.
And how are they calculated?
Well, there are different ones. So there's the reliable ones. The two reliable ones would be the Dunedin PACE study, which looks at the pace of aging. So, some of us, it's like the tortoise and the hare. Some of us are aging more rapidly because we're zipping down the aging freeway, going 100 miles per hour. And then you've got the tortoise, and these people are aging much more slowly. So that gives you the pace at which you age. And then there's glycan age, which uses glycans, which are markers of inflammation throughout the body. And they use a vast quantity of inflammatory markers. And I don't want to misrepresent them in any way, so I won't go into it. You'd have to ask them about it. But these markers give you a picture of a person's biological age. And again, their susceptibility to future disease. Right. Inflammation is one of what scientists call the 12 hallmarks of aging. And so, because there's a lot of crosstalk between these different pathways of aging, if you can reduce inflammation, you can have a positive impact on the other hallmarks as well and slow your pace of aging.
I believe there is some information. Is an interesting topic, because there is some inflammation that we need in our body.
Yes,
and there's a lot we don't. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's acute and there's chronic. Just like doctors are fabulous at acute care, but let's go to the chronic care because it's a long-term, constant thing. Acute inflammation is great for us because it makes the body's repair system jump into action. But when we have chronic inflammation, and a great example that we've all experienced is, stress, maybe from work, maybe from bills we have to pay, or maybe from, just too much of everything, children, work, mortgage, and mowing the lawn. That chronic inflammation is not good for the body. So as you've probably heard this or even said it yourself, we have evolved to have a stress response to something like a tiger or a bear that's running after us. And it gives us the wherewithal to run and to, run up a tree and get away from this or hide. But when our boss says, oh, we haven't done a good job, or we have a deadline, or, there's a mortgage payment coming up and we can't make it because interest rates have gone up. That's a chronic stressor. We have exactly the same response to it as we would to the bear or the tiger. But, usually with the bear or the tiger, either we're eaten or we get away, and you have that, I'm safe response. But with these other modern day stressors, we never get that release.
Yeah.
So it's always there in the background, and that inflammages us and, can lead to all sorts of signs of aging internally and externally, things like wrinkles.
Yeah. Okay. And so bringing it into the movement sphere. So your particular age is 21. Am I right in saying?
Yes, that's what they say. I mean, look,
and
this is a test. I'm not. I'm 59. I'll be 60 in a couple of months.
Which is incredible. And even if it's 23, 20, it's still brilliant. It's wonderful. So, and more with the backdrop of what we've discussed in terms of your experience. That's why it's more incredible, because obviously you will, and in your own words, and I've said it myself, when I was in pain, you felt like that was something for someone an awful lot older than yourself.
And I'm sure if I took the glycan age test then, I would have had the biological age of someone in their late 60s, because that is when that's an age that we more often associate with osteoarthritis, right? Or other aches and pains.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of how you can influence that, I'd like to bring it into movement and the sort of understanding of, can movement have any benefit in the body? And I'd love to start at a cellular level.
Yes, of course. So movement definitely has an opportunity to help us de-stress and get rid of some of that adrenaline that is raised when we perceive a stress. So imagine you see, your boss is coming and asking you for something you can't deliver, like the tiger is coming and chasing you.
You run.
That adrenaline response is coming, and it is there to get us to, fight, flight, or freeze. And if we're sitting passively, where does that adrenaline go? Well, it stays in the body. The body will turn it eventually into hydrogen peroxide using 3 different antioxidants from the liver: catalase, superoxide dismutase, or glutathione. And at some point, when we do not have enough of those antioxidants to neutralize the hydrogen peroxide, that actually goes throughout our body. It goes through our hair follicles. It goes through our skin. People say when you get older, you seem to lose color in hair and in your skin as well. Well, that's one of the things that can happen. And that's why people who are under stress tend to get gray hair more. Now, if you choose movement instead, you're stressed, you've got all that adrenaline, get on the treadmill, get outside, get your sneakers on, and or go into the garden and rake a bunch of leaves, just get the adrenaline released from your body. And that's what it's there for. Another thing that I like is shaking. And if you've ever seen zebras or giraffe who have been chased by a lion in Africa, after they have escaped, they do this. They're shaking, right? Yeah. And that's getting rid of that excess adrenaline. Dancing is another great way to get rid of it. And I often find myself, even when my kids were little, I'd be dancing in the kitchen, which they thought was hysterical. But it is a great way to de-stress as a mom, and you're making dinner, get the music on and get moving. Yeah. So that would be good to just get rid of that excess adrenaline. Cortisol is another stress hormone, and you don't want to have too much of that either. So movement is a great way to get that out of your system. And of course, when we move, it helps with mood. So we have things like our endorphins kick in, right? Which make us feel so good. That runner's high that people get when they've been out exercising. But if you're more of a, what I call myself, more of a social walker, I go around my little neighborhood in North Oxford in Summertown, and I walk. I've got to get to the grocery store. I try and do some brisk walking,
Yeah.
but then I see neighbors or friends, and I get a big oxytocin boost. And oxytocin is anti-inflammatory to the cell. So there are a lot of ways that movement helps with cellular health, and exercise. Heavier exercise actually activates a cell renewal process called autophagy.
Right.
And that's another hallmark of aging. If you can't activate autophagy, they say, there are even some scientists who say that aging happens because autophagy no longer works. And
so tell us a bit more then about what that actually means. So it's a cellular renewal process.
Yeah, it's like it's like self-oven cleaning for your cells.
Love
And
that.
yeah, so basically, your cells have these, we'll call them magic garbage bags, that automatically will take misfolded proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell, all of this malfunctioning cellular material, and puts it into a bag, and then we'll burn it up in a little trash compactor. And when it burns it up in the trash compactor, it actually creates energy. Now, this is why fasting is good, because when you fast, the body says, I need a source of energy. I'm not getting it from food. Where can I get it? I can burn up these malformed particles in my cells, and that creates energy. But we need to do this. It's like maintenance for your house, right? You've got to continually change the light bulbs, take out the trash, keep the lawn trim, all of this stuff. And this self-maintenance, when it's working, keeps our cells young.
Right.
And also the healthy centenarians in the world have they have high levels of a compound called spermidine that activates this maintenance process in the cell, and they make it in their gut biome, and they also get it from their diet. So it is something that we can do. Humans are capable of continuing to do this through lifestyle as they get older. It's just that modern life isn't conducive to it, especially if we're eating a lot of processed foods, and we're not moving properly, we're not sleeping properly, we're burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great explanation. I love the whole burning process and the understanding of that, because otherwise you're going to get full of rubbish, and that's going to do you a lot of harm. So that makes a lot of sense. And that's and autophagy and inflammation. Is there any link there at all? Or
well, so if you yes, because if you have cells, so at a certain point, our cells hit a limit to the number of times that they can sort of copy themselves.
Right.
That's called the Hayflick limit. And when you hit that limit, the body says, okay, these cells are not making copies properly anymore. We don't want them to become cancer. So we're just going to put them off to the side. Now, I always say it's like that one relative who drinks a little too much at the family wedding, and you're like, Uncle Jack is up to it again. He's had too much to drink. He's making inappropriate comments. Let's park him in the corner of the banquet hall. And you hope he doesn't do anything. You hope he falls asleep. But in fact, what he does is he still makes inappropriate comments. He still does silly things. Well, that's like these senescent cells. And senescent cells secrete inflammatory molecules, and they basically infect the other cells around them. Just like Uncle Jack makes the mood bad for all the people he talks to and the inappropriate comments he makes. So that's inflammation. Yeah. And so there is a link. If you can't use autophagy to help get rid of some of those cells. Now, we know that specifically with immune cells, autophagy, spermidine activates autophagy, and we know spermidine can get rid of senescent immune cells.
Okay. And at what point is does autophagy kick in? In you said in fasting mainly.
So it really depends. So there are different ways. There are many different ways that you can activate autophagy. One is through exercise, so through intense exercise. But again, there's a Goldilocks zone. You don't want to overdo it because then you get too much
Stress
inflammation
and
and it's
stress on the
stress.
system. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And we all know what it does to our joints. Um, you can do it through diet with fasting mimetic compounds. So spermidine is one, nobilitin is another, curcumin is another, and turmeric. And so, all of those things would help. And then by not eating, you can also activate it. So generally they say that if you have abstained from eating for 16 hours, then you will activate autophagy. But if you can combine some fasting, and we all fast overnight when we sleep, if you can combine that with some of these food molecules that mimic the fasting process, then you can kind of kickstart the autophagic, the benefits from autophagy, and you can extend them even after you've started eating.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So, and obviously there is a lot more focus, in longevity on sort of supplements and diet.
Yeah.
Why do you think there is less focus on movement and exercise, given that it is so beneficial?
And there really should be more focus on it, but I think because it's hard. Sleep and movement are a bit they're the stepchildren of longevity. People don't want to do them because it takes longer to see the benefits. Or I mean, if you buy a supplement, maybe you psychosomatically feel like, well, I've done something, right?
Yeah.
But to see the benefits of exercise, it's a lifestyle choice, right?
Yeah.
You have to incorporate it into your daily life. Now, the good news, and as you have shown through all of your amazing work, is there is functional fitness, right? There's lifting the groceries, there's bending down to put the dishes into the cabinet. There's also all this functional stuff that happens in the garden when we plant things or dig things. And I think we aren't putting time into that like we used to.
Yeah.
But if we can rebuild that back into our lifestyle, there are so many rewards. And even just incorporating 10 minutes of brisk walking where you can still talk, but you can't sing, have been shown to be of great benefit to both brain and heart health, especially in those of us 60 and above.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I agree with all of the above. But often, and was the case for you, if you have chronic illness, then you feel quite exhausted by that, and therefore it's hard, isn't it, for people dealing with those situations to actually
Mm.
encourage them to make those different lifestyle choices, and yet potentially for them could be incredibly, as you've shown, beneficial to
It
their body. So what advice would you give people who are kind of in that stuck position and perhaps haven't known that they could advocate for themselves more in other ways than through medication?
Yes. I think that with regard to people who maybe they have chronic fatigue or maybe they're hypothyroid and haven't yet been diagnosed, a little bit of exercise, at least with hypothyroidism, has been shown to help the thyroid perform better. Not overdoing it, but getting some gentle movement in. So I would encourage people to just try. Now, if you're feeling breathless when you go up the stairs, which is a classic hypothyroid symptom, then you need to find a doctor who is going to help you. And I know, especially in Britain, it can be very hard because our reference ranges are not in line with the rest of the world in
Okay.
order to get diagnosed. But look for a doctor. Don't be afraid to fire your doctor or to look outside of the NHS. You might have to. Sorry to say. And then that's on the advocacy side. And there are things on, I've talked about movement, but there are things on the dietary side that you can do to help with, we say, a low functioning thyroid. Move as much as you feel you can. Even light stretching in bed might be helpful.
Yeah.
And
my mantra is obviously every movement counts, and I believe that statement applies to everyone in actually any position. And this is from someone who is, really struggling to move in any way, or is disabled in some ways. I think we have to really put the positive on the fact that any kind of movement is helpful. And if that is seated in a chair, and it is waving our arms along to a lovely song, or being able to just lift our heels and sort of dance while seated, all of that is proven to be more beneficial than not. And as you say, it has the mood lifting benefits. It's basically getting our systems working and trying to bring us to homeostasis, our lovely, as you were describing with your immune system, everything to a nice balanced point that the body is constantly and brilliantly searching for all the time. And that's what we want to encourage. And I think the problem is that, particularly with the word exercise, not so much with the word movement, that it's become such a big thing to tackle, to overcome, that, as we said before we started recording, that then you have the problem that you can have complete inertia because of overwhelm. And actually, there's so many small things that can change, that can build and want you to even change other things. It sort of helps to almost shift the mindset as well, because you may not see that sort of instant massive change, but we can't all look for massive changes. And I think, again, we've been sold a duff one that, things can be solved immediately, very quickly. And in fact, it's taken a long time often to get into some of the positions we're in. And therefore, it's going to take quite a while to get out. But if you know your trajectory is upwards, then that should be the evidence that what you're doing is the right thing.
Yeah, 100%. And even like you said, those toe raises seated in a chair, they help with the calf muscles. The more muscle you have, the more myokines, which are an anti-inflammatory compound, you will have. So as you say, every little bit counts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's lovely to have that backing as well. So we also, I just wanted to briefly bring in. So you run Oxford Healthspan, and that's selling spermidine, which is branded as Primeadine.
It's a food derived spermidine.
Food-derived spermidine, which I also take, as does my husband. And the other way that I know you is through the Oxford Longevity Project, which is a wonderful non-profit organization where it's basically intending to sort of educate the public about exactly what we've been discussing and a lot more.
Exactly. Getting the latest science that is accessible to people. So this idea of autophagy, actually you can do it. You don't need any money to activate it. You can either get it through compounds in your food, or through fasting, or through exercise. So teaching them about this, we've talked about ketones, we've talked about NAD, we've talked about, all sorts of different things. And Wendy was amazing. One of the most popular things we did at last year's Smart Aging Summit at St. Hilda's College at Oxford University was your movement. Everybody loved it. Being given permission after a presentation to, basically do a kind of patty cake. And it was so much fun. Everybody loved that. And we have another Smart Aging Summit coming up on the 7th of June at Rhodes House, home of the Rhodes Scholars at the University of Oxford. And Angela Rippon, who was the oldest contestant at Strictly Come Dancing, she will be speaking.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And Dr. Louise Newson will also be there. We have Wafa Al-Sayed, who's an oncologist, but very holistic, looking at both allopathic and holistic treatment. we've got some great people. Jeremy Howick, who's one of the world's leading experts on the placebo effect, will be speaking. And I hope we'll have you to do some movement, Wendy.
Of course. It was actually a really fascinating day. And, I was concerned by the lineup, some of the lineup, that it would be too difficult for me to follow. And actually I did pretty well, to say. And it really piqued my interest about a lot of different things. And I've followed some of the people since, and yeah, really fascinating, and some great conversations in between the breaks. And also, I had my balancing beam there and my movement mat. And we had who's coming on the podcast as well, so Christopher Ball, who that did a lovely get up from the floor. He's 90 years old, and he came across and said, I can get up off the floor without using my hands. I said, okay, so show me. And then quickly said, and can I video you?
Did you get it?
Yes, I got it. And it's on the top. If anyone wants to go and look, it's on the top of my Instagram grid, because it went to 2.4 million people.
Oh, Chris, I can't believe that happened. Amazing. Wonderful. Do you have to tell him? I don't think he knows that.
I did tell him. I don't think I told him it was quite that much. But in all honesty, he wasn't too interested, because it's social media and it's not his thing, which I really respect. He doesn't have a mobile phone.
He doesn't even have an email address. Yeah, that's probably why he can still do that.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So no, it was a great day. No, and that sounds like you've got a great lineup again. And I love to have, like this podcast, like other things, accessibility for people to information. And that's one of your main reasons that you do this, is to share what happened to you. Exactly. And to say, there's more. Always, advocate, get out there, look for it, and find out what you can.
And be empowered. Yeah, I want everyone to be empowered, but also the body does respond to these inputs, and we might not see it. Yes. But we have such high and unreasonable expectations sometimes. So just know, and I think I'm living proof, that even when you have a sort of dire biological age, which I was 39, but must have been in my late 60s then, you can still have the opportunity to change that. And
absolutely.
That's what's exciting, I think, is reversing that biological age.
Yeah. And that was in different terms also my experience, where I wondered if I would ever move the way that I had again. And also just be out of pain. I just couldn't imagine for so many years actually not experiencing chronic pain. So it's quite amazing to then be able, thankfully, to look back. But that took research, deep dive, a real understanding of what the body was and what it's capable of. And you've experienced firsthand how it can heal and adapt, and I have, in a different way. So you kind of hope that that gives the boost to someone who needs that message. And so if you were going back to your younger self before that diagnosis, what's the one big sort of, not all the separate bits, but the sort of the main advice in that kind of maternal way you would have given yourself, that people may see in themselves and perhaps respond to, that would create some kind of a shift?
Believe in your body's power to heal. Remove the things that are like kryptonite to it, and give it the things it needs to get stronger.
Yeah. And find out what those things are for you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's not the same for everyone, but there's so much that you can try.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Leslie? Have you got, apart from the Aging Summit, have you got anything exciting on the horizon that you can share?
I will be at the Health Optimization Summit in Austin, Texas in April, Biohacking Weekend in Oslo, Norway, also in April, at the Health Optimization Summit in London in September. And I think that's it
Wow,
for the
that's
time being.
enough. A lot of travel there. Well, listen,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for your time, Leslie. It's really, really interesting, very, very inspiring. And you're a real living case of what is possible. And the fact that you keep sharing it, and keep learning as well, because you've realized that that's a real key to it. So I hope that has inspired people to make change in their lives too.
Me too. Thank you so much, Wendy.
I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.